heat pump rebates, and other things happening. Look forward to hearing more about the multifamily housing EV charging projects. But I think it's time to think about getting more resources. And we had always talked about that before with the Climate Action Committee, that either doing more utility taxes or going for some sort of property tax initiative, measure that would raise enough to really, push us along and keep us on track for meeting our climate action goals. So I suggest that the committee please take that up and start thinking about it. And one of the really winning factors for Ann Arbor, if you listen to the City Climate podcast, I think it's called City Climate Corner. They have many good podcasts from cities all around the country. And in fact, Albany is in there for our Measure DD success. But the way Ann Arbor was able to get that passed was that the staff did a really good job of putting together a much more detailed implementation plan that really explained how these funds were going to be used and how people would benefit. And that was the really selling factor that then put it through, and they were able to get that in place. So for the next 10 or 15 years or so, they're raising $7 million a year, which is great. And if Albany could do something scaled similarly, I think that would help us immensely, especially with staffing to do the amount of work that is going to be required to really get the word out and inform the community of what they need to do. I think we're not reaching as many people as we really should. So I encourage you to consider that. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? If yes, raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair. Oh, we do have a hand raised now. Lucinda?
Hi, I just tuned in, so I may have missed the beginning, but are you asking right now for new agenda items or?
We're at the public comment section.
Okay. I would like to follow up on an email that I sent to the Climate Action Committee a few weeks ago. Actually, shortly after the last meeting, the issue of EV charging was brought up by the Transportation Subcommittee, and I did email the full Climate Action Committee after that. And there were 5 EV chargers that were authorized by the City Council in 2021, or in 2020 for implementation in 2021. And it's been very difficult to find out what happened with that. I think that's something that the Transportation Subcommittee should look into. Here we are in 2023, halfway through 2023. Our city still does not have any EV charging stations. And I think it's really important to, especially to apartment dwellers and others who would like to have EVs but have no ability to charge them, install chargers in their homes. It's also really important to send a message to the community that the city is taking climate crisis seriously. It's really important, I think, from an image standpoint, to really stand behind. You're encouraging the public to move away from gasoline vehicles to EVs, and the city really needs to put some money and effort behind that. Thank you.
Okay, there are no other members of the public with their hand raised. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now go on to the first item, which is announcements.
Great. I would like to first turn it over to our new member, Committee Member Vigil McClanahan. Committee Member Vigil McClanahan, if you would like to provide a brief personal introduction to the committee so we all know who we're working with now.
Sure. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Chairwoman. My last name is pronounced Vigil, McClanahan.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's my first day. I'll be doing a lot of listening and not a lot of talking. My family is new to Albany. I grew up in the Bay Area, but we spent most of the last 10 years in rural Yolo County. We moved there so that I could farm. And for that decade, that was my climate action. And now I'm learning, what we can do in urban spaces. I would say the two topics I'm most passionate about here in Albany are human-powered transport. I feel really privileged to be able to walk and bike pretty much everywhere I need to go. And I want to do whatever I can to make that easier for more people in our town. And the other is street trees, because I came from somewhere that was very green. and I see a lot of places where this town could be more green as well. And I know that there are a lot of sort of co-benefits. It's not just nice to look at a tree. They do a lot of work. So thank you, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all.
Great, thank you. Well, on the topic of street trees, I'll pass it to Natasha for an announcement about the street tree management plan.
Yeah, so I'm excited to share that the street tree inventory component of the street tree management plan is complete. And we're currently working to bring a final summary presentation about the data and the data collection process to the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission next month in June. And of course, we encourage you all to attend as members of the public if you're interested in learning more about the trees in our community and the whole process behind that. But I do also want to share that we plan on having a community viewer of that inventory publicly available a couple months later. We're still working out how we can make it interactive, among other things, but keep a lookout for that as well. And lastly, on the topic of the plan, a community survey, the first community survey will be going live sometime next week. So again, please keep a lookout on the city channels, maybe an eye out for some flyers. And this is ultimately a preliminary survey to gauge what the community's vision is, what their priorities are, and it asks questions regarding your preferred method of community engagement and some other opportunities to leave some feedback and thoughts. So again, please look out for that, and I'll pass it back to Lizzie for the next announcement.
Oh, question?
Yeah, the last part you just said, the community survey, is that for the street trees specifically, or is it more general?
It is going to be for the street tree management plan as a general, but of course, street trees from the inventory is related to the overall plan. It kind of lays the foundation and gives us an understanding of where to prioritize, like planting to expand the canopy, and also proactive maintenance so that we can continue to expand the co-benefits that street trees provide, but also minimizing any safety risks and hazards. So yes, if you also have a comment regarding street trees in the community, I think this survey is also a good place to put some input. So
I think the goal with the survey is to gauge preliminary community goals and priorities for the plan so that we know how to tailor the planning process, and also, of course, include the outcomes of the survey in the plan as an outcome. Yeah. And I just wanted to highlight one of the things Natasha said. As a reminder, the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission is going to be the lead advisory body on the street tree management plan. We'll be bringing periodic updates to this committee, but it won't be as frequent as the updates to the PROS Commission because they're the working body. But we do want to remind everyone that in addition to being Climate Action Committee members, you're also members of this community, and therefore you're allowed to attend any advisory body meeting you'd like and make public comments. Just a reminder, you should make them on behalf of your own opinion, your own voice, not say I'm a representative of the Climate Action Committee. But you're all more than welcome to attend PROS Commission meetings whenever they discuss the plan. And then we will bring periodic updates to this body. Any questions about that? Okay, great. Last announcement, we're very excited to announce that, let me share my screen before I, leave a cliffhanger. Enter a sharing key. This is, I'm really leaving you on a cliffhanger. I promise this is very exciting. Oh my gosh. Okay. Woohoo, free compost. We have officially launched a compost hub at the Gill Tract Community Farm right down here on San Pablo Avenue. Basically what it is a pile of compost. Here you can see Michelle Plaus. She worked very, very hard on this project, so if you have thoughts on the compost hub, make sure to email her your positive comments. But basically it's a pile of 10 tons of compost, or 6 tons of compost, and community members on Sundays from 12 to 4 are able to bring your own bags or buckets, shovels, scoop as much compost as you'd like, take it home with you. We'll talk about the legislation that inspired this compost hub later in this meeting, but we're very thankful to the Gill Tract Farm for this partnership, for the ability for allowing us to be able to provide free compost to the community. We just had our compost giveaway a couple weekends ago. I saw one member of this committee there, and we handed out 40 cubic yards of compost to, I want to say, over 200 residents in Albany. So there's definitely a demand in Albany for folks to be able to take compost home. And now we're hoping that through this hub, we'll be able to give it out for free more frequently. Like I said, it's open Sundays, 12 to 4 at 1050 San Pablo Avenue, which is the UC Gill Tract Community Farm. And it's a partnership between the UC Gill Tract Community Farm, UC Berkeley Stop Waste, and the City of Albany. So make sure to check it out. And that concludes our staff announcements. Do we have any announcements from committee members?
I have 2 random things. One is tomorrow is Bike to Wherever Day, Bike to
Yes.
Work Day. Encourage people to bike. There will be a Bike to Work station in the morning, 7 to 9, under the Ohlone, or on the Ohlone Trail under the BART tracks. It's a great day to bike around, and there are other things going on in the evening. You know, some bike home stations and some, I think there's some happy hours. And then the other thing is, I was over by Sprouts today, and I noticed that those Volta electric vehicle chargers are now operating. So that's very exciting. We have 2 more places where you can charge your electric car in Albany. The bad news, one of them was in use, and the other was blocked by a service vehicle. It is not a good look to have the service vehicle parked in the Volta spot, preventing anyone, like a gas-powered pickup truck, preventing anyone from charging. So still work to be done.
Great, thank you for the update. Any other announcements?
It's a good time for questions on
Sure.
staff announcements. Yeah, first, awesome to see the compost hub come to life. Yeah, as someone who's gone to the compost giveaway the past 2 years, I've seen it's a hot commodity. So
Yes.
how does that happen? Yeah, I had a question. Is this something that I guess is planned to kind of stay active and get refilled as compost runs out?
We have restocked it once now, so we've done 2 drop-offs at this point. Right now, it's running as a pilot project for another year from now. And at the end of that year, we'll have an assessment of the program and potentially request more funding for it. But at least for the next year, it's anticipated to be running at the Gill Tract Farm, with the goal of having it be a staple in the community.
Awesome, great to hear.
Any other questions? If not, we can open it to public comment.
Yeah, let's open up to public comment.
If any of members of the public would like to speak to the announcements that were just made, please raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair Mohammed.
Okay. Now we can move on to discussion of announcements. Does anyone have any comments?
I think we kind of already did the, reflection piece. Apologies. We can move on to, we don't have any presentations, so the discussion items.
All right. We can now move on to the next item, which is discussion and possible action.
Yes. And apologies, it's not showing up there. As a reminder, it's a presentation with follow-up discussion on the City of Albany's consumption-based emissions inventory. And I have turned it into a presentation that discusses what we're currently working on, and then opportunity for where we could get creative and expand within capacity. Let's see, for some reason I keep getting prompted to reconnect to Zoom. Apologies. Okay. All right. I hope you can all see the screen. So as I mentioned, this is a presentation, kind of a follow-up presentation from last month's presentation on emissions in the City of Albany and how the City of Albany is, what our greenhouse gas emissions inventory looks like, meaning like our impact on the global climate crisis. And this is a deep dive into the consumption-based emissions inventory, which is more of an estimate of how our individual actions and our consumptions of goods and services within Albany, even if they were generated outside of Albany, are also causing an impact on the climate crisis and what we can do to address those emissions. And I would just like to preface this by saying it's a very complicated topic. I'm going to try my best to present well on it this evening. If you have questions that I'm unable to answer tonight, I'm happy to follow up. There are some experts in the Stop Waste community who know a lot about this stuff. So as a reminder, the image on the left is our 2021 emissions profile by source, and it shows that our largest emission sources that are occurring within Albany come from transportation emissions, and that's primarily tailpipe emissions from vehicles, and also residential and non-residential natural gas use. You'll also see that a small sliver of the pie is waste, and that is waste, methane emissions being generated by the waste we are sending to landfills. And I think it's important to note that this 4% is an estimate. We don't currently have a way to accurately gauge what our waste emissions are. And then on the right, you'll see an Albany Community GHG emissions inventory forecast. And the reason I chose to include this, you'll see on the next slide, it's just that I wanted to highlight that our goal is to have net zero emissions by 2040. And this shows that on our current trajectory with no action, we'll be at around 40, I would say that's about 48,000 metric tons CO2 equivalent by 2040. Of course, the goal is to get that down to zero or negative. But this slide, in comparison, so because it's a little confusing, the emissions here and here, which are the emissions that are occurring within the City of Albany, this is how they compare, around 50,000 metric tons CO2e annually compared to around 300,000 metric tons CO2e annually, which is an estimated consumption-based inventory. That consumption-based inventory consists of jet fuel due to air travel, vehicle manufacturing and repairs, vehicle fuel, both direct and indirect. I apologize, I can't recall the difference between those two right now. I should mention this is at a household level. It also includes construction waste, energy, electricity, and natural gas at the housing level, individual housing units. The food we're consuming, cereals, fruits and veggies, other foods, dairy and meat primarily are the largest chunks. Then there are also goods and services. Goods consist of small appliances and home entertainment, so think our TVs, our computers, our PlayStations, etc., our iPads, our home furnishings and large appliances, and then you'll see that clothing is a large chunk. Other goods consists of other things we're consuming that are somewhat undefined. Services is largely undefined. And then the negatives are recycling and composting. So how our actions to recycle and compost are reducing the amount of new emissions that are being generated in this consumption-based emissions inventory. Like I mentioned, just pulling this out to show that our consumption-based emissions inventory, which is an estimate based on 2013 data, they're around 6 times the annual community inventory. So the emissions that are tied to the goods and services we're consuming in Albany are about 6 times the annual emissions we're generating in Albany. We included the consumption-based emissions inventory estimates in our climate action and adaptation plan that was adopted in 2019. And in response, we created a 3rd chapter of the CAP that is facilitate a carbon-free economy. And the CAP says, the strategy commits the city to choosing low or no carbon options for typically high emissions purchases, such as concrete, fuel, or fleet, while incentivizing individual actions to reduce waste and carbon in their daily lives. So trying to get at the household level to try to influence consumer habits. So what are some of the things we're already working on? There was a specific request to include an update on the reusable bag ordinance. So I looped that into this because I think they are related. In 2012, the county developed an ordinance, so it's a countywide ordinance that individual cities were given the option to opt out of if they did not want to participate. So the city of Albany effectively chose to opt into the ordinance by not opting out. I know that's a little confusing because a lot of times ordinances are opt-in, but this one was a don't opt out and you're in. So we're participating in the countywide reusable bag ordinance. That ordinance was updated in 2017, and now it applies to all restaurants and stores in Albany. Stores can distribute reusable bags and bags made of post-consumer recycled content, but they must charge 10 cents for each of those bags to incentivize consumers from taking them, to try to disincentivize consumers from taking them. I think this is an important bullet because a lot of folks do notice that they hand out thick plastic bags now because they're deemed reusable and they're made of PCR content. And this has become a very tricky, it's become a very challenging piece of the market to weed out because technically the ordinance says that, and it's hard to get stores to not give out any kind of plastic bags because there are still consumers that request them. The enforcement for this ordinance is conducted by the Alameda County Waste Management Authority, which is Stop Waste, and customers and individuals from the community are able to provide anonymous complaints at the link here, which is reusablebags.ac.org/non-compliance reporting form. I do think although there is still a loophole in this ordinance, it is still doing good in our community. Since implementation of the countywide ordinance began in 2012, there's been a 60% decrease in the use of plastic bags and an 80% increase in the use of reusable or no bags by customers.
Can I ask a question about that chart? Is that was that a chart of countywide data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I would guess that in Albany it would be smaller because, to my knowledge, I don't want to name names, but we only have 2 large stores that are providing those thick plastic bags. The other program we're currently working on, because it is a state mandate and also because it's the right thing to do, is SB 1383. It's the California Short-Lived Climate Pollutant Reduction Act. It requires all jurisdictions within the state of California to adopt an enforceable mechanism or ordinance that establishes the city's, I want to say participation in, even though it's mandatory, but basically says we're participating in enforcement of this. It requires us to annually conduct compliance reviews of businesses to determine compliance with organics collection service or to provide waivers for those businesses that qualify. So this basically means that any business that is not currently putting their organic waste and their recycling into the designated bins are considered out of compliance. It requires us to provide organics collection services to residential and commercial sectors, so everybody who meets a certain threshold of organic waste generation must be recycling and composting and that's 100%. Establish edible food recovery programs. We're doing that in partnership with the county, which we're very thankful for. So making sure that large grocers and restaurants and cafeterias are recovering food that they don't sell or serve at the end of the day and giving it to food recovery organizations that redistribute that food to those who are in need. We're to conduct outreach and education to residential and commercial generators of organic waste and recycling, so which is basically everybody. And that education has to be both about preventing waste and also properly sorting. We're to conduct outreach to Tier 1 grocery stores and Tier 2 restaurants, generators for the edible food recovery compliance. The city is supposed to procure recycled organic waste products, so compost and mulch. And based on population, every city has a certain target. The city of Albany, based on our population, has a target of 12,000, I think it's 12,300 or something, tons of compost and or mulch per year. And for context, the compost hub, that big pile of compost, was 6 tons. So it's a lot of compost and mulch. We're also supposed to procure recycled content paper products for city use. So all of our printing paper, paper towels, tissue paper is all supposed to be at least 30% post-consumer recycled to stimulate the market for those materials. Standardize the cart and bin colors for what we put at our curb. So the trash carts are supposed to be black or gray, recycling blue, organics green, and that's to promote proper sorting throughout the state. So I'm sure most folks are familiar if you go somewhere else in the state, say for vacation or to visit family, and you notice that their trash cart looks different than your trash cart. It's supposed to make everyone have the same colors. We're supposed to inspect and notice to violators if they're putting the wrong things in the wrong carts. And we're also supposed to maintain accurate and timely records of all activities related to implementation and enforcement. And there is annual reporting on compliance. And actually, the city of Albany right now is on a bi-monthly reporting schedule. So we're reporting our implementation efforts to CalRecycle every other month. The main goal of this program, I know it sounds tedious, there's a lot of things we're supposed to do, but it is for a really good cause. So 1383's overarching goals are to reduce organic waste disposal by 75% by the year 2025 and rescue surplus food that is otherwise wasted. Why this is important is organic waste in landfills emits 20% of the state's methane emissions. So organic waste that ends up in the landfills turns into methane. And methane is 84 times more potent than CO2, so it's considered a super pollutant. Also, organic waste, including food scraps, yard waste, paper, and cardboard, make up 50% to what is sent to California landfills. And reducing those short-lived climate pollutants, including methane, have the fastest impact on curbing the climate crisis in both the near term and the long term. So if we're to wipe out the emissions coming from landfills, we could have a significant impact on the climate crisis by 2025 if we're on target to meet this statewide goal. Of course, it also provides edible and delicious food to those who need food. Just a quick update on our progress on 1383. It's a priority due to the fact that noncompliance will result in fines by CalRecycle, and it will also result in significant impact on Albany's consumption-based emissions and embodied carbon, and overall our city's impact on global climate change if we are able to reach compliance at both the residential and commercial sector. We do have consultants helping us out with compliance because all those tasks I listed are a lot for a small city to take on, any city, but particularly a small city. We're already collecting organic waste from residential and commercial sectors in partnership with the hauler. What our big goal next will be making sure people are putting the right things in the right carts. So making sure that just because someone has an organics cart doesn't mean they're using it. We want to make sure they're properly diverting all of their organic waste into the right cart, and also recycling. SB 1383 implementation actually has the co-benefit of helping us cover CAP actions 3.1.1, 3.2.2, 3.2.3. and a few innovative strategies for compliance we've rolled out in the last year. Natasha very generously provided food pails to multifamily residents. How many would you guess you handed out just in the last month? Maybe 40. And Natasha asked a lot of those. Would you like to say this?
Yeah, one of the questions that I was able to ask these multifamily property residents was this your first time composting? And I would say maybe like a quarter of them responded, yes, this is their first time composting. So it was really exciting to provide a resource that could eliminate a particular barrier that, yeah, makes them a little bit easier to compost from a multifamily unit.
We also provided over 50 Albany commercial businesses with 3-stream waste containers, sorting guides, and stickers. The photo on the right is taken from, I won't name names because I didn't ask them if I could include this, but one of a very well-known Solano food establishment that put up the 3-stream sorting containers in the brochures after we provided them. And we're also using all possible outreach channels and opportunities and increasing the information shared to try to get the word out there, because public education and outreach is very important to make sure people are participating in the program and also doing it correctly. Enough 1383 for now. Other programs we're working on is we are trying to expand access to repair and reuse opportunities and also stimulate the sharing economy in the city of Albany. So actually just last weekend, we held the annual citywide garage sale, which is also in partnership with the cities of Richmond and El Cerrito. People can get discounted yard sale permits to host garage sales all in the same day, advertised for free by the city of Albany. This is the map on the right. 53 households in Albany participated last weekend. I personally, this is just anecdotal evidence, drove through the city of Albany last Saturday, and I saw tons of people. I was confused if I missed something because there were tons of people on the streets, and then I realized it was the garage sale. We also promote resources made available by the county, including the resource guide that's available at stopwaste.org. And the resource guide, I think it's very clever that the county did this, emphasizes reuse, donation, and repair over disposal. If you type in the item you want to get rid of, it says, have you considered repairing this? Or have you considered donating this? And I think that's really clever because a lot of those other tools that are out there just say, this is where you can get rid of this, but this says the next best use. We also do, as I mentioned, as much public outreach and education as we're able to. The 2 very beautiful graphics straddling the muffin photo were created by Natasha, and they're promoting both diverting organic wastes from the landfill and also how to reduce and then properly dispose of packaging waste. And the message there was not just here are the correct bins to put it in, but it was how can you also think about how to reduce that packaging waste, because that's huge. And we also promote reducing food waste. So some potential future programs that the city could consider implementing in the coming years. The county, through Stop Waste, released a model ordinance for cities in March of 2023, so just a couple months ago, for cities to tailor to their specific needs that would increase the compostable or reusable content of both dine-in and to-go-ware in the city. So I'm sure we're all familiar with if you go somewhere to get takeout food and it comes in a plastic container with plastic forks and knives and spoons and straws. This ordinance would hopefully aim to target to get rid of those plastic items and instead replace them with compostable items and also, where possible, reusable items. So city staff, we know this is a priority for the council. It's already included as well in our climate action plan. We would like to bring a model ordinance to CAC for discussion sometime in the summer or early fall for consideration. And let's see. We do recognize that developing this ordinance and coordinating with the hauler might take a few months, so we might have to practice some patience, but we're hoping that we can start to roll out this ordinance at the end of the year, early in the new year. And we think it's important because plastic foodware is one of the greatest sources of litter in the Bay Area. And also, if you were to look again at the consumption-based emissions inventory, plastic foodware is one of the biggest forms of waste that's directly tied to fossil fuels that we all consume more than we probably think about. There's also the possibility to expand the plastic bag ban. As I mentioned, there are only a couple establishments in Albany that we know of that are handing out the thick plastic bags. A couple considerations, though. I'll back up. The city of Berkeley adopted its own ban on plastic bags in late 2022. I think they start enforcing it June of this year, and it effectively bans those thick plastic bags by saying that plastic bags can't be handed out that are not truly compostable or recyclable. A couple key considerations for Albany that we should keep in mind is that Berkeley is expecting to spend a lot of money on this because it is very hard to eliminate those remaining bags, and the enforcement of it alone is going to cost a lot of money and staff time. That might also pose a challenge to a city like Albany. Complaint-based enforcement is particularly challenging in Albany because we don't have much code enforcement capacity. Typically, if we have a violator, one of the staff from our division writes a letter, but we don't have a dedicated code enforcement person at this time. We also have found that doing some outreach on reusing bags and bringing your own bags at the county level has helped to increase that 80% reusable bag statistic that we saw on a few slides. And we also think that the focus on reusable and sustainable takeout ware in 2023, 2024 will likely have a greater impact on reducing overall amounts of plastic waste. So while we think this is still a strategy that could be pursued, it's important to weigh it against the other policy options that we have at the moment. Apologies. And just the image to the right is another one that Natasha created. We sent a citywide mailer out to all individual households and tenants. Apologies.
Yeah, the mailer was also printed on 100% post-consumer recycled paper, so that was really exciting. But yeah, one of the mandates of, again, kind of bringing back SB 1383, but public education. So I had the opportunity to put together a mailer this year, and yeah, this is a little snippet from some of the sustainable tips that was included in there.
So we're still trying to promote bringing your own reusable foodware and bringing your own bag whenever possible. Another thing that's worth highlighting that may get to this plastic bag ban issue without us having to create our own program, and also an exciting piece of legislation. Governor Newsom signed SB 54 in June of 2022, and it's one of the most significant extended producer responsibility programs in the world. So it basically creates authority for the state to go to producers and think about all the producers you know that give out any kind of plastic, which name one that doesn't. And it says you need to figure out how to eliminate plastic from what you're selling. So it requires those producers to design plastic packaging to be fully recyclable, and it actually has to be proven that it can be recycled, because a lot of folks right now say that their item can be recycled even if it's not actually being recycled. Or it can be compostable by 2032. Apologies. And it designates the state the authority to oversee implementation. So the state will directly oversee those producers rather than putting it on the city to manage on its own. I believe that's my last slide, so I will leave it there for any questions.
All right, are there any questions?
On the, let's see, what was it? The compostable, recyclable containers for the takeout containers. You said that you're building a proposal for an ordinance. Do we have feedback from the businesses in Albany about what their opinion is on that? I just wondered if we knew ahead of time if they're actually already pro in favor of that, or what their impacts are. I'm certainly all for this. This is, I'm glad to see this coming up, but I just wondered, that just jumps out as like, that would be the counter argument. So do we have any sort of survey data or input from them?
Yeah, not yet, but we recognize that we need to do that because that buy-in will be really important. So before we're able to take an ordinance to council, we anticipate having to do some staff level outreach to the business community. And we've already started talking about that with our economic development liaison. How can we make sure that this won't hurt our local businesses, but also still find a way to make sure that we can reduce the amount of plastic waste out there. So to answer your question, no, we have not gathered any information yet, but we know that that's a critical piece of the process.
Okay.
We can go ahead.
I'm curious about our upcoming 1,200 tons of compost. I love compost. That's a lot of area. Is that something that the Parks and Rec Commission has taken up?
They actually just had a presentation on it last week from the Public Works Department, who is the department that actually puts the compost down in the city of Albany. So this year we have to achieve 30% of that target. Next year is 60%, the following year is 100%, and thereafter it will always be 100%. We're right now at the staff level exploring options for how we can both give compost away to the community through the compost hub, the compost giveaway, other programs we haven't thought of, and then how we can also apply it locally on our ball fields, our parks, how we can creatively use mulch. So we're exploring a suite of options for how to meet this target. We don't have a silver bullet, but we are working to figure out what we can do to meet the target.
And kind of a follow-up to that, when you do the calculations about greenhouse gases and going carbon negative, are you going to factor that in? Because another way that compost is going to change things is not just using that waste, but it's also changing what the plants that we have around the city can do by way of sequestering carbon.
Yeah, we haven't yet figured out a way to calculate that. I don't know if anybody has on like a community-wide scale, but we are hoping to include something in our street tree management plan about how compost can be applied maybe to trees and then boost the soil's ability to sequester carbon and also the tree's ability to sequester carbon by allowing it to grow more with more nutrients. It's a very complicated calculation to do, so we know that it will have a positive benefit of removing carbon from the atmosphere. We don't know how to calculate how much.
I will send you some ag resources on that.
Oh, cool.
They found some really cool benefits to what they call hedgerows in agriculture, but applying compost to the hedgerows and seeing what they do. So they do a lot. So it'll hopefully be good news.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't mention in my presentation that as committee member Vahil McClanahan mentioned, compost is not just good for using what we put in the green cart and putting it to good use, but when you apply compost to landscapes, it increases the nitrogen in the soil and the nutrients in the soil so that the plants are better able to store carbon deep underground. So it's a sequestration strategy. So while we're trying to remove emissions from everything going on in Albany, this further removes the carbon that we're unable to get. Any other questions?
I have a question about that one, I think, site you mentioned where you can like search stuff for how to reuse things. And it's like, do you want to repair this or something? What website is it?
Yeah, it is. I can pull it up if you're curious. It's a great resource. It is. I don't actually know what the URL is off the top of my head. It's resource.stopwaste.org. And let me pull it up so you can see what it looks like.
You can also go to stopwaste.org/resource, and it should also take you to the same website.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll pull it up because it is cool to see. You can say, like, what do I do with clothing, children's, near Albany? And it'll say, reuse is best, share locally on listservs. And then it shows you options throughout the county, including Contra Costa County, where you could take something for repair or reuse or buyback. And it hosts, free pickup, free drop off. It gives you all kinds of information, so it makes it very easy for someone to choose not to put it in the landfill cart.
All right, are there any other questions?
I had one question about the Berkeley plastic ban costs. Could you go over that cost breakdown again? Was that $350,000 tag mostly due to enforcement costs?
Yeah, it was mostly due to hiring staff to enforce that program. Because they're complaint-based enforcements, and it's specific to the city. If anyone complains that a store isn't doing it, they would do enforcement and also technical assistance to get the store to know which bags to buy that are compliant.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If there are no other questions, I guess we can move on to public comment.
Mm-hmm. I see one member of the public with their hand raised. Nick Peterson?
Oh, great presentation. This is, it is a little frightening when you see the comparison between the direct versus the embedded, but we have more control over what we release directly, and so that's where we can really focus and not lose hope. And then policies and larger forces and laws hopefully will reduce how production of these things we consume start to wean out the fossil fuels. So I had a few things, I'll just go fast and you can just answer them. The compost for Albany, the thing said 1,200, but you said 12,000 tons, so I was just wondering what that was.
1,200.
1,200, okay. And can the city impose a tax or fee on certain items to discourage their consumption? Is that something they could do? Can gas stations be condemned and removed and replaced with housing projects? I mean, why are we having gas sold in Albany? We shouldn't. Is sustainability staff doing all the outreach, data collection, and monitoring of the organic waste? I think you mentioned there's actually a consultant helping with that, which sounds good because it seems like that would eat up a lot of your time. The Big Belly waste containers up Solano, they don't have composting options. And I noticed in one of my local parks, there is a compost container. So I hope that we do put the compostable containers along Solano so that that's available. Plastic, please, the foodware, we need to get on board with that and just do it as fast as we can. No, the reason that the businesses use it is it's the cheapest. It's going to cost them more to do it the other way, and they'll have to raise prices, and they don't want to do that. But we can't keep having all this plastic dumped all over the place. So, it's just going to be a bitter pill, but we need to do it. And then whether enforced or not, I still think it's important to decrease plastic use and even shame businesses into doing the right thing. And maybe a portal could be set up or an app where people in the city could, cite offenders. It would go in, they would get an email that said, hey, it's been noticed that you're violating the thing. And then you would send people directly. You wouldn't have to go around randomly. You could have the citizens of the city helping to enforce it. So there might be a way to do that. Anyway, that was some of the thoughts I had. Thanks.
Do any other members of the public, if any other members of the public would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. Okay. Lucinda?
Yes, a great presentation. I have, gosh, lots of comments and questions. First of all, I want to express strong support for the model ordinance for sustainable takeout containers. I know there's been some, Berkeley has had this ordinance in place. I know there's been some concern expressed here about the expense of enforcement of both a sustainable takeout ordinance as well as a plastic bag ordinance. And I feel very strongly that even if we do not have the funds to aggressively enforce this ordinance, such an ordinance, it has a lot of value. And I want to give an example. Just last week, I was at Barney's, which is in Berkeley in Solano Avenue. Berkeley has a plastic foodware ordinance. Barney's is not in compliance. They're still providing the clamshell plastic takeout containers. I talked to the manager afterwards, and to be able to talk to the manager and say, not only does this, as a customer, I don't want to solicit a business that is using plastic takeout containers, but to be able to say, you're also not supporting our city ordinance. You're in violation of our city ordinance. That has a lot of clout on businesses. So, I mean, the previous speaker referred to, shaming business, but I think it gives you a lot more clout in asking them to do the right thing, to follow the law. So I feel like that has a lot of value irrespective of our funds for enforcement. Also, as far as the plastic bag ordinance that allows the thick reusable bags, the thick reusable bags are a huge environmental problem. They are all over the place. I do cleanup, and that really hasn't been improved. There's really not been an improvement. It's just these thin bags were now replaced with the thick plastic bags. And I understand the rationale was that since these thick plastic bags are technically reusable, the hope was that people would reuse them, but that has not happened. So that continues to be a problem. And I think another, only charging 10 cents a bag, that doesn't get anybody's attention. We need to charge like the real cost of the bags, like $1 a bag will get consumers' attention. And I'm also curious about, is SB 1383 currently being enforced? Because I do see widespread non-compliance. I think the majority of people don't even know about SB 1383. They don't even know that there's a legal requirement that you compost, and I think there's some outreach needed there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, David Wemmer.
I just want to agree with all the previous speakers, but also just, the plastic takeout containers just drives me nuts. Just seeing those things pile up and they're all over the place, and I know they're getting thrown away into the recycling bins and things, and they're not getting recycled. And I just support getting an ordinance, whether you can enforce it or not. I think if you can get the ordinance passed, leave it to us citizens, and we'll guilt and communicate, and get out there and pass the word. And it would be nice if we could afford some enforcement, but as a first step, it's so simple. Let's just pass it and move forward. Thank you.
Okay, there are no other members of the public with their hand raised. Back to you, Chair.
All right, now we can move on to discussion and possible action on this item. Does anyone have any comments?
Yeah, and I'll just clarify too, our staff recommendation, I don't know that we have any action to take tonight. I think staff is just looking for feedback on, it sounds like there is consensus that we should move forward with the foodware ordinance. So we will continue to do that. We know it's a priority, and I think it will be for most cities. But we also just want thoughts on how we can reduce consumption-based emissions inventory and make a more sustainable community from this advisory body. We don't have to have all ideas tonight, but we wanted to open the floor to feedback.
Well, I really like the posters you made, Natasha. I thought they were really good at explaining information well and clearly. Something I would like to see is that in schools, there's not a lot of information about like recycling and stuff. I was actually surprised because like they're just huge bins and then like there's not a lot of information on things like that. So I'd love for a way to, I guess, involve schools as well in the outreach target, I guess. Does anyone else have any comments?
I guess I have a question. To what extent, so we've got transportation emissions like by private cars, and that does not fall into this category, right? Because those are emissions produced in Albany.
So it's confusing. So the consumption of fuel does fall into the consumption-based emissions inventory, and that piece of the pie that's the community-wide inventory also. So there might be some double counting there.
Okay.
There's also indirect costs of fuel, which I believe mean like the processing of the fuel at the refinery. So just because the emissions are being consumed at an Albany gas station, they're tacking on extra for the emissions that were released, say, at a refinery in another city to produce and refine that fuel.
So I'm curious with that, and that this might be me needing to read more about where we're at, but how does the work done, say, on the Transportation Committee fit with this inventory and the changes we're trying to make?
Yeah, that's actually a great question because we talk about it a lot. So there's the Climate Action Committee that focuses on policies and programs related to reducing emissions, and sometimes that dances over into the transportation side of things, but we do still have the Transportation Commission that's responsible for actually recommending the policy to Council for transportation. We have a transportation, zero emissions transportation subcommittee of this committee that I think we'll hear an update from is meeting with a member or two from the Transportation Commission to talk about how transportation policies at either advisory body can reduce emissions. I do know that the Transportation Commission will be in charge of the active transportation plan update in the near future. And that's one thing similar to the street tree management plan that their commission will oversee largely because they have the transportation specific focus. And a lot of members are members who have jobs in transportation. But the CAC will still receive periodic updates and be able to participate in that process as well.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Oh, I was just going to say that I support the foodware ordinance. It sounds like a good thing, but it sounds like we don't need to do anything as a committee to have that move forward.
Yeah, it's already included in the climate action plan. We actually started working on it in 2019. We didn't take it to the CAC at that point, but then COVID hit and a lot of efforts to work on ordinances like that stalled because for a while the narrative was that food serviceware, if it was reusable, could transfer COVID.
Yeah.
Months later, we learned that it's not true, but that stalled a lot of the efforts to move that forward and created kind of a stigma around reusable foodware. And now that Stop Waste has taken the lead on creating a model ordinance, and a lot of other cities in the region are going to start working on it. We recognize that now there's a lot of momentum to pick that back up. Also, foodware is, I think, unique. Oh, it's not unique, but all cities have restaurants that all of our community, they're going to Berkeley, they're going to Richmond, they're going to El Cerrito to get foodware, and if all the cities do it kind of around the same time, there's more momentum there than one city having it and people going to other places to get their foodware and vice versa.
Yeah, it was great to hear the comments from the public about a couple things. One was the Big Belly on Solano, and I'm wholeheartedly in favor of getting the compostable takeout containers replacing the plastic. But it's interesting to think about. Okay, so we do that, and we get more compostable public waste, disposal. Then that's sort of a synergistic thing.
Yeah.
So that seems like an opportunity for the city to do both. And I also really appreciated the comments about the enforcement and the difficulties with that and the cost of that, and the alternative of, hey, if we put an ordinance out, then that gives sort of an official statement at least, and it allows a little bit more pushback from people. So I appreciated that, thought of we don't always have to think in dollars and cents on that. So.
I'm wondering, just hearing the comments tonight, if we can explore maybe opportunities to include the bags in the takeout ordinance, so it's one ordinance, rather than us doing a piecemeal approach and probably slowing down whichever comes second. So we can definitely explore that opportunity.
Yeah, both are big problems, so yeah, that'd be great.
And I just want to speak to the Big Belly item. Last year, actually, we installed more of the organics Big Bellies, and right now the goal is to have one of the organics every other or every third. And we know that's not perfect, but there are a lot of areas on Solano and San Pablo that don't have space for 3. And also, the Big Bellies are shockingly expensive. And we entered into a leasing agreement to try to reduce costs, and that was kind of the maximum amount that we had allocated to adding those. They're in the tens of thousands for one unit. It's pretty crazy. So I don't know that in the short term we'll be able to add more to the city's Big Belly fleet at this time, but we do want to continue to encourage people to seek the next Big Belly that has the organics in it, and we're hoping that by having better signage on them, that will help. Yeah, apologies. It sounds like an easy one to just put more of the organics out there, but we've run into budget constraints with those.
Could you explain more about what a Big Belly is? Sorry.
Yes, yeah. Big Bellies are the, if you're on Solano Avenue and you see the large trash cans that are kind of next to each other, and they have the handles where you open and place stuff in, and a lot of times they have solar panels on the top too. They're just basically high-tech trash cans, and the reason they're so expensive is because they're backed by a system that alerts us if there's overflow issues. They're locked, so they're enclosed so pests can't get in and pull trash out and cause litter issues. They're also expensive because they come with technical assistance, so there's a team of people who, if we have a damaged Big Belly, rather than our Public Works Department having to go fix one, we can deploy a team of Big Belly staff to come and do quick repairs and not have to wait on parts and knowledge for how to fix them. So basically, they're the big, high-tech looking trash cans that are out in the community, and they're in a lot of cities in the region.
Do any of you guys have comments on the discussion? Okay. I guess there are no other comments, so
We have some great feedback, so
Yeah.
thank you all.
okay. I guess we can move on to the next item. Or yeah, okay.
It's subcommittee updates.
Updates, yeah.
Perfect. We can go in any order you'd like. They're just ordered by alphabetical.
All right. guess the Environmental Justice Subcommittee can go first.
We don't have any updates.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Vice Chair Melgen is not here to provide an update on the home electrification mandate subcommittee. He'll be back next month. So next is the student outreach and engagement subcommittee.
Yeah.
I can share for that.
Can you make sure, Mike?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Perfect.
I can share for that. We have a document, but I don't know if I can share my screen, so I can just read it off of my laptop. If it loads. My Wi-Fi is being really questionable right now. But essentially, we drafted up a kind of outlined resolution. And the resolution includes stuff such as, we followed resolutions in the past, so it includes an intro, all of our goals, and some of our goals that we wrote down were encouraging independent learning of students about climate change, developing a program encouraging climate literacy, recommending future programs to promote climate education, and teaching students how to act as their own climate stewards and play their part in curbing greenhouse gas emissions. Following that, we have a lot of statistics, research statistics that back it up, including examples, an outline of our process, as well as our own classroom rundown of what we want it to look like in classrooms, as well as a lot of collaborative materials, some resources that we can piggyback off of. Some I wrote were the Youth Climate Action Team, which is an international climate organization. They did a summer program where they hosted, I think it was elementary and middle school students, and then they have a lot of great resources and they're open to sharing those, as well as a nearby organization in Berkeley. I work with the Community Resources for Science, and I'm actually doing a climate literacy program with them. So a lot of place for collaboration, and of course, Berkeley High School's climate resolution plan. I put a question mark. We were a little still iffy about the financial aspect of it, and how we would get money for such support and whether that would come from the city or how that would work. So we're still trying to figure that out, but we do have, like an outlined proposal. I would share my screen, but that's gonna get too complicated. But again, open to questions or any comments on that front.
Can you remind us what the plan for taking the resolution to forward is?
Yeah, so this was kind of our outline, and we wanted to get feedback from you all first to see what is either missing, what sounds good, what seriously comes to your eye, and then once we get feedback from this group, then it would go to second review of school board members who we've already been in contact with and have supported what it looks like so far. But we would send the more fleshed out version, and then we would send that to the board to vote on to pass. So curious if you guys have anything, because we wanted to make sure that everyone had voice and opinion in this, not just our subcommittee.
This is a resolution at the district level?
Oh, yes, let me update you a little bit. So yes, we're doing a climate resolution in AUSD in this district, and it would it would start off focusing primarily on elementary school aged, and what the goal is it would have, in our process right here, our classroom rundown, we put ideas such as there's a program at Albany High School called EdSet, which is an environmental design program, and essentially students have internships, and this could help fulfill that internship, so it has incentive for the high school students. Maybe they could come in. We don't have classes on Fridays, so students could come in for those hours and teach these children about climate-related issues, and we would do like a capstone project with them, and it would just it would discuss topics like endangered species and droughts and wildfires, but also like the kind of more inspiring part of all of that, like what can you do? And at an elementary school level, it's stuff like turning off the water, and we can't tell them to vote and like go to the city council meetings, like at their age, but the goal is that we would start with the elementary school, and then it would go to the middle and the high school, and students leave AUSD not only understanding the background of environmental issues, but also knowing as they're 18 adults now, what can they do to help decrease their own emissions, but also take larger action outside of that.
And also the goal of this is to provide climate education and literacy that is clear and but also realistic, because we don't really see a lot of that nowadays, and so we really want to push for that.
Yeah, kind of some background as well. A lot of this stemmed from our own education in the Albany. I wasn't here for middle and elementary school, but from what I've heard, there was no climate teaching. And at the high school, we do have an environmental science class, but unless you choose to take that AP course, and a lot of people aren't incentivized to take AP courses for many reasons, and unless you take that course, like, you're just missing out on an entire environmental education. And a lot of, my peers that I've talked to have no idea about anything. They know the basics of, oh yeah, I shouldn't take long showers, or, it's best to try to throw your trash in the right bins, but that's kind of to the extent that it is. And students don't really leave knowing, like, the severity and what they can do once they go off to wherever they go off to after high school.
Well, as a parent, thank you. I appreciate this. This sounds great, and I appreciate how you're thinking longitudinally, that it starts, you plant the seed, and then it takes a few years to really know everything you could know. Thank you.
All right, if there are no other comments, we can move on to the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee. Any updates?
Let's see, actually, I had one question on the last update there. Is there any, I guess, non-Brown Act violating ways to share out, I guess, the kind of like the draft resolution? I guess sometimes I process better just like reading it ahead of time, so I'm curious.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. So maybe, what's your timeline? Would this be something you could bring next month to share?
Yeah, I have an outline on my computer right now, but the goal of this meeting was to kind of get all of your feedback on it, so then we could apply any feedback to this form, and then we can, I don't know how that works, if we can formally share it.
I think it would have to be at a public meeting.
Okay.
Because we're not allowed to share materials for feedback between meetings.
Okay.
Would it be a presentation or like a discussion item?
I can check. We could dedicate a discussion item to it.
Okay, great.
And then we could possibly, if it was ready in time, we could attach it to the agenda packet in advance.
Does that sound good to you? Okay. So then, our next steps from then would be reaching out to the school board members that helped us kind of flesh out this and give us examples, and work with them to have more of the details. This is like a pretty thorough outline, but just getting those final details in, and then we can present it next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Any updates from the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a number of different items here to mention. So just first following up on last meeting, we had mentioned the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program, which provides up to $700 million in federal funding for EV charging, where local jurisdictions can apply. Just wanted to follow up there. We had forwarded some information along to Lizzie and Michelle, and they informed us that they had forwarded that on to a staff member in Public Works who manages grants. So thank you for doing that. And that program had also been extended a couple more weeks to June 13th. I know we know it's a very short turnaround, but would encourage any possibility to look at that program, because it's quite a bit of funding. I believe it's up to 80% of the cost of chargers can be covered. So it's a pretty good opportunity. Also wanted to thank Lucinda Young for mentioning the past attempts to, I guess, that 5 EV chargers had been approved in the budget, and for passing along some information to the subcommittee about that. So very interested in kind of talking to staff about kind of what happened there, and if there's anything we could, repeat in the future that make sure those funds don't lapse, or we're able to build chargers if they do get approved.
We haven't made this announcement in a while, but we did probably a year ago. We clarified. I I think that grant was secured in 2017. It was from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District through the CHARGE program. And it covered, I think, 20% of the installation costs of 5 chargers. And unfortunately, it was an installation issue. We weren't able to dedicate the resources to getting them installed and weren't able to fill the gap in the funding at that time to get them installed. So the grant was rescinded. So we no longer have that grant. I know it comes up a lot, and I don't want to announce it every time, but that grant, we no longer have it. So we're unable to pursue this. We would have to seek new funding and then find the same installation staff time and the bridge funding, I guess I would call it. And that, unfortunately, continues to be an issue. We appreciate you sending over additional grant program information.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. And when you say kind of staff installation time, would that be kind of staff in Public Works that would be doing that?
Our engineering program managers.
Gotcha. Okay, great.
We have a very trim staff that are also working on stormwaters and sidewalks and repaving projects, and we don't have any staff dedicated to projects like that at this time.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah,
I think, sorry, I'm diving in, and I was going to share, we are going to give a presentation summing a lot of this up too. I think one area that can be an issue for the city of Albany is because we have such a trim staff and we have so many projects that are mandatory by the state, like repaving, repairing sidewalks, managing stormwater. It's hard to find staffing for doing these other, I don't want to call them discretionary because I understand the importance of them, but we don't have staffing dedicated towards like other projects. So we don't have anyone right now who in their scope would be able to do EV charging. So where we have a need is for some kind of project management support, if that could come through grant funding or something, so that we could maybe have contractors support installation. But that's, I think, the biggest barrier for us to installing chargers at this time. And we've been talking a lot about it, so I'll just share and then I'll stop talking. We'll provide a presentation either next month or the month after about other opportunities we've been looking into. And happy to chat more about this later.
great. Thank you. Yeah, those are all very, very useful to learn practical details of how we could move something like this forward. Great. Okay. I had 2 other items I wanted to talk about. I was able to, as part of my day job, but it was also interesting here, attend a workshop by the California Air Resources Board entitled Light Duty Clean Transportation Equity Projects Lessons Learned Symposium, where they talked about how it's gone administering programs like the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, Clean Cars for All, kind of a variety of programs focused on either kind of upfront incentives for new vehicles or leasing vehicles, as well as charge cards that can help subsidize charging if, say, installing a charger in your home is not an option. So it's interesting to learn about that program, as well as a relatively new portal managed by KALB and Grid Alternatives called Access Clean Energy. It's accesscleanenergyca.org, where they pool a lot of this information on these vehicle rebates and charging rebates together and try to make it a more streamlined process to apply for these, where say you can do a quick check to figure out if you're income qualified for these programs and kind of apply for more of these programs at one time. So yeah, I would recommend to anyone out there listening to check out Access Clean California, and if there's any ways we could include that portal in kind of outreach programs around clean transportation. I think that it looked like a really good site and is actively being developed. And yeah, they include electric vehicles and also want to include programs around home electrification as well.
Great. If you could send all that you just said to us, I know that Michelle, actually, we haven't shared this with this committee yet, but as a part of the multifamily electric vehicle charging pilot program, Michelle developed a handout for all tenants of the property with information about how they can get EVs, how they can charge them, and the more resources we can put on that for future use and maybe make that a public document to download from our website, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, can do that. Let's see, and as part of that symposium, there was one speaker, Danae Evans, who's the Transportation Services Project Manager for Richmond, who gave some really great case studies of how she was able to work with Volta, a charge station company, to get public chargers installed in Richmond right away. Provide free charging for the public, and there was no taxpayer funds that went into that. They were able to give the space, the high-profile parking spaces, and Volta, saw value in that deal. So, and I guess she also did a similar project with EVgo to get chargers installed in Richmond. She said she was happy to speak. We were interested in talking to her as a subcommittee, and also could see if anyone from staff wants to attend that, or how we do joint calls like that. But anyway, she said she was interested in sharing lessons about how Richmond's gone about that.
If you could send all this to me in an email, that would be much appreciated.
Awesome. And the final thing, then I'll stop talking, is I had an interesting conversation with one of your colleagues, Brendan Brown at the Albany, who's part of the economic development efforts, about ways that EV charging promotion might be kind of included or aligned with the interests of the business community. And one idea was around how there's a series of grants around business attraction improvement, and if there's ways to expand that to include kind of small upgrade costs needed on the property for EV charging. Say similar to the charger that's behind Bob's Burger or something like that. Don't have much there, but it seemed like an interesting idea and a good way to align interests.
We've been chatting with Brennan behind the scenes, so
Excellent.
we'll include an update about that in our presentation next month or the month after.
I'll just add, as part of the subcommittee, that we have contacted the Transportation Commission and identified people, Ken and Fareed, who are interested in interacting with us, and we had some scheduling challenges trying to get together this month. So hopefully we'll get to meet up our subcommittee with one of them over the next few weeks and have something more for the next meeting. So
Great.
It's thank you for your help in getting the how we can connect, get these little startup scheduling things going. But it seems productive that we want to, we've got a good list of things that we want to pursue, and just sorting out what's within whose purview and how we can help each other. That's it's good communication.
And thank you for your patience as we figured it out for other committee members who aren't on that subcommittee. We have to be very careful as a city to not violate the Brown Act. And in doing so, we sometimes have to ask questions of city clerks and city attorneys. And we did find out that a subcommittee of one committee can meet with a subcommittee of another committee or commission so long as they not have a quorum of neither members. So it took us a little bit to figure out the details, so thank you again for your patience. And I do want to say, if anyone ever has questions about that collaboration, please come to staff first, just so we can clarify how it works, like in this situation, just to make sure we're able to collaborate while also not putting our city at risk of violating a state law. Great.
Any other comments anyone wants to make? All right. I guess we can move on to
Public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Public comment. If anyone would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand on Zoom. Nick Peterson?
Thank you for all your work on the subcommittee items. That's really good. On the student outreach and engagement, First, I have some good news. I attended today a presentation that Valerie Riss, Albany High School, I think it's AP Physics class, put together about putting solar on Albany High School, and they're going to be presenting that to the school board. And what's surprising is that in helping them out with that, they actually came up with a pretty comparable results to the hired consultant that is looking at solar power for the whole district. So it was it's really good. They're going to go in and plug that with the school board, and hopefully that'll have a positive effect on moving forward. So that's a student engagement that was really successful out of instructor Valerie Riss' efforts in her physics class. So I thought that was pretty good. The other thing I was thinking is it sounds like one aspect of student outreach that always hoping when I was on the committee was that we could use the power of the students and the schools and the community's interest in schools to sort of distribute information about what the city's doing or what the goals of the climate action adaptation plan are. And I realize it's a little dicey because there are two different administrations, but again, that was sort of something it'd be interesting to know if high school students could support some of the efforts of getting out the news about the climate action adaptation plan and the actions the city's taking. I think there would be some good benefits there. And then on the, not to belabor a point, but on the public charging stations, I think this illustrates something that we're a small city, sometimes the bar is a little too high and we can't do it. But I think there's some lessons learned that we're not learning. And, I realized there was a grant that was for part of the money, but the city also set aside a hefty chunk of money in the budget to do this. And finding out that Public Works didn't have the staff to really take it on or wasn't able to accomplish it, I think that sort of shows that maybe we need to align Public Works more closely with what the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan is trying to accomplish. And we can't just have Public Works say, well, we're not going to do it, or come up with it's too expensive. If it's too expensive, what is the expense? Can we get some feedback on how much over budget was or why it didn't happen? But if it was just that someone didn't have the time, that's really not acceptable. And we need to find people who can have the time. And if we need to get more funds to do it, then we have to raise revenue to do that, because climate change isn't going away and we can't just keep doing business as usual. That's my thought on that. Thanks.
Okay. Next public speaker is Lucinda Young.
Thank you. I wanted to comment first on the student outreach. I think this is a really important project. I can remember recently reading a discussion about the most effective way to reach parents about climate change issues is through their children. So not only are we raising awareness in our children, but hopefully that is being shared and effective as well, outreach to the adults. Thank you, Lizzie, for providing some more clarification about the 5 charging stations. What I continue to be confused about is that the plan does state that the funding is supposed to come from BB funds, sidewalks and streets. So I was a little confused about how that fit in with the fact that the outside grant lapsed. But I'm happy that it is, that Councilman Hodges is looking into this further, and I'm hoping that Albany will be applying for this grant. It does concern me that our limited capacity for applying for grants, it causes me a lot of concern, because under the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a huge monumental amount of funding that is becoming available to state and local governments. And if we don't have the capacity, and most of those funds are available through grants, and if we don't have the capacity to apply for these grants, this money is going to go by the wayside. We're not going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think that's a big issue that the city needs to look at. How are we going to be able to take advantage of this unprecedented amount of money that is going to be coming down the pike in the next year, in the next 6 months to a year, to our communities? And let's see, I think that's it. Thank you.
There are no other members of the public with their hand raised.
All right, this is the last item on the discussion and possible action, right? Okay. We can now move on to future agenda items. Does anyone have any requests? Go ahead.
There was a slide on the California State Bill on plastic recycling, and I need to do more research on that myself because I really wasn't aware of that. I was wondering if maybe a future agenda item could be something like how the state bill is going to guide communities like ours to implementation, and what resources and what maybe, things are going to be provided by the state to help us. I mean, we're always kind of looking for, like, when is the upper level government going to start doing stuff that's going to drive this kind of change? And that seems like one of those things that could be impactful. So maybe how that's coming along, and what can we do to align with that going forward. So
Just to clarify, are you talking about the SB 54, the plastic packaging?
yeah.
Okay. I can try to provide a brief presentation. The one thing happening is that it just got passed last year, and part of the legislation was that the state was going to figure out how to implement it. So not all the answers are there, but I'm happy to provide like a what we know now kind of thing. It is a very cool piece of legislation, and we've seen a couple of presentations about it, and it gives me a lot of hope. So we can share.
Yeah.
Just
And
as an
this is
informational item.
Future agenda item. It doesn't have to happen next month.
Oh, yeah. I think it's going to take them another year or two. From what I know, there's going to be a statewide coalition forming of producers of packaging that are going to get together and determine how they're going to do it. And I don't even think they formed that yet. So it's very preliminary, but very exciting. So yeah, maybe in the coming months, once more information comes out, I can give an update. But in the meantime, if you want to Google on your own SB 54, it is very fascinating.
And then the second item, with all the talk of funding and stuff, could we get an update on the electrification tax revenue and how that's been spent on climate mitigation adaptation actions? I don't know when it would be appropriate for that, or if that's something that we can look up on our own, but maybe, I know the city staff doesn't report to us, but we have a vested interest in, sort of understanding what funding is available and what's been spent. So just wondering if we can get an update on that.
I can definitely provide an update. It's actually great timing because we're in the budget process right now. And actually on Monday night, our finance director gave a very comprehensive update of the city's budget to council, and it included the piece of that's the UDT revenue. So I'm happy to give a presentation on it. I think it'd be pretty quick though, because it would just be summarizing here's what it is. So it's also possible that I could just attach that budget summary to the council or to the agenda packet. We can determine how that would work, but I'm like picturing it in my mind. She wrote a sentence about how much has been spent and what's been allocated, and we can bring some kind of an update.
Any other requests?
We do have some public comments.
Okay, if there are no other requests, I guess we can move on to public comment.
Nick Peterson?
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, to just touch back on something I said during the public comments phase, which is And I know that soon you guys will be working on your new version of your work plan. But I think, the Measure DD has proven to be very successful, but I don't think that's the end of what the revenue stream that's needed in order to really make progress and launch these programs more, and especially, I think, be able to have people focused on this from the grant side, from others, really working this. So I would recommend starting to talk about what other kind of revenue raising programs or measures could be put forward. And you're going to have to justify how that revenue is used. So then thinking about what that would fund and how that would help, especially disadvantaged communities. One thing I was a little discouraged about is when the heat pump program went through, there wasn't a specific set aside for the low income. And I know a lot of people think, well, there weren't that many low income, but I think a lot of low income people really don't know even how to go about it. So we're going to have to outreach more. And it would be important because it's integral, equity is integral to the climate action adaptation plan, to do outreach and really try to get those low income people to take advantage of these programs that we're putting there for them, and not just expect them to come to the city on their own. The other thing I'm a little worried about, and I'm not quite sure, it'd be nice to have a presentation or something. I remember Jeff gave a little bit of overview of how staff is sort of incorporating the climate action plan throughout all aspects of the city, but I get really worried when I hear, Public Works didn't do the charge stations because they couldn't get around to it or something, or it was too expensive, and so they let it lapse. And another classic example is over the past 3 years, we bought 5 more big gas hog SUV police cars, which even though they're hybrids, they only get 34 miles per gallon and they're burning gasoline, so they're polluting. I think we need to have the climate action adaptation plan be an integral part of all city action, and that it needs to be front and center in all decisions made. And I think there's too much stovepiping. I don't really see that happening. Public Works is not getting rid of their gas-powered leaf blowers. There was a bit of a struggle when we were talking about I had some early on meetings with the forester to try to start doing some push on the tree planting, and it just seems things are still too stovepiped, and climate action isn't front and center for what a lot of people are doing.
Okay, we have one more member of the public with their hand raised. I just want to clarify that we do have a low income portion of the heat pump rebate program. It's a pretty significant additional funds available. So just want to clarify that that is something we included in the recommendation of council, and they adopted it. And if anyone has a question about the heat pump rebates, we're happy to answer individual questions. Next public speaker, Lucinda Young. Lucinda?
Yes, I had a couple comments. At last month's meeting, a member of the public spoke about a number of trees that had been removed along Washington Avenue. And I have noticed, and I live not far from Washington Avenue, and noticed that there are a large number of additional trees that are now tagged for removal. And I'm assuming there is some reason that maybe they're diseased or something, but I'm wondering if is the Climate Action Committee involved in these kind of decisions? And I think this is another example of what the previous speaker was talking about, that there seem to be a lot of decisions being made without considering the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. So I wanted to bring that up. And then another concern I have is, again, how are we, and I know we have the heat pump rebates, which are great, and I hope we will find some additional funds to extend that program and maybe even expand electrification rebates to electric bicycles, maybe to electric hot water, heat pumps. But my concern is how are we going to reach the existing inventory of homes that have gas appliances? And I know there's some discussion about, we have some new building code that prohibits gas in new buildings and so on, but we have this huge inventory of existing homes, and the committee really needs to come up with some ways to move homeowners to replace their gas appliances with electric. And I know rebates are one way, but the rebates are not enough. And I don't have the solutions, but that really, that's a very big concern. About a third of our emissions are from buildings. And that's it. Thank you.
I can speak a little bit on the street tree removal public comment, but I just want to clarify that as per the city's street tree removal policy, it's entirely in the purview of the Parks Rec open space. So if there's a non-emergency tree removal, a homeowner can apply and pay a fee and submit it to City Hall. And the Pros Commission reviews this on a quarterly basis. And it happens at a public meeting, so any member of the public can give public comment, a lot of the word public, but ultimately, they make the decision at the meeting whether to approve or deny that application, and it kind of goes to the review there. Was there anything?
And then if you are interested in hearing more about the City of Albany street tree inventory, Natasha mentioned earlier that the Pros Commission will have. I'll let you speak to this because you know the details better than I do.
Yeah, we will be bringing a street tree related agenda item to the Pros Commission next month. We're going to give a presentation on the final summary of the inventory that was recently completed. So hopefully we can touch on that there as well.
And members of this committee are welcome to join that meeting. It's the first?
The second Thursday of June. I believe next month will be June 8th, as long as there's a quorum, among other factors. So.
And members of this committee are more than welcome to join. Members of the public are more than welcome to join and make public comment and hear information about street tree removals and the street tree inventory update. But it's as Natasha mentioned, statutorily the Pros Commission's purview to oversee those items. Any other questions, comments from the committee?
Go ahead.
Sort of pursuant to that question about street trees and whose purview they are, I'm really excited that there's like a liaison beginning to happen with the Transportation Committee, and I'm wondering if there's interest here in doing the same thing with Parks and Rec.
We've explored that in the past. I think we're too early in the street tree management planning process to know what a joint subcommittee would discuss, and what we want to make sure everyone has a productive use of their time. And we think that if we're bringing on consultants to help with the street tree management plan, we want to know what their timeline is and what their thoughts on the next steps are before we think through how advisory bodies will get involved.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting will be June 21st.
21st. Yes. Thank you. Okay, great. I think this is like record time for this year, so congratulations.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.